One of the most common rumors circulating around the NFL right now is the idea that the Raiders might trade their franchise quarterback, Derek Carr, and then draft Oklahoma quarterback and Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, Kyler Murray. They're going to trade Derek Carr and draft Kyler Murray. That is the rumor circulating around the NFL. And it's weird. What's interesting is the idea at first makes sense. You can say, some people say that Derek Carr struggled last year. I disagree. I think if you look at the numbers, oddly enough, his stats, he had over 4,000 yards passing, which was his highest ever. This is Derek Carr. Derek Carr, the Raiders quarterback, statistically had one of his better years of all time. He had the most passing yards he's ever had, over 4,000. He had a 68% completion percentage, his highest of his career by like 10 points. He also had 19 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. Not a terrible year statistically. They didn't do well wins and loss-wise, but I don't think he's an awful quarterback. I think he's a solid quarterback on a really bad roster. But the catch is that Derek Carr is making a ton of money. He makes $22 million in 2019 this year. It'll steadily decline, actually, till I think 2022 he makes about $19 million, but he's making a ton of money. He's a large salary cap space holder. He's a big hit to the salary cap. And we've seen teams in the past go to Super Bowls with a template. Teams like, they take Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz, Jared Goff, teams that have really cheap quarterbacks. That's a strategy to get to the Super Bowl, is you take a young quarterback with a really cheap contract and then build a good roster around them and get to a Super Bowl. If that, in fact, is the Raiders head coach, Jon Gruden's plan, if his plan is to get a really cheap young quarterback and build a Super Bowl team that way, then yes, it makes sense to trade Derek Carr and draft Kyler Murray. However, a majority of this rumor is based on one quote that Jon Gruden gave about Kyler Murray. He was talking about how he no longer believes in the idea of a prototypical NFL quarterback. He said, I've watched Drew Brees, I've watched Russell Wilson, really short guys, short in stature, who have succeeded at a high level. And then he said this, he said, I'm watching this kid Murray coming out of Oklahoma, and I'm putting away all the prototypes I once have. And the media took this quote and just ran with it. They said, yes, this is fantastic. We're going to go. We're going to do our thing. And rumor circulated, and that's how the Kyler Murray rumor began, was a silly, meaningless quote about Kyler Murray that Jon Gruden gave. You got to remember, look, Jon Gruden, first of all, he's just saying that short quarterbacks can succeed. He's not saying he loves Kyler Murray. He's not saying he would draft him. He's saying, I believe in Kyler, and we shouldn't put the limitations on him because of his height. This quote definitely does not mean that Jon Gruden is planning on drafting the Oklahoma quarterback, Kyler Murray. You got to remember, Jon Gruden worked for ESPN for years as a broadcaster. His job was literally to give interesting, insightful quotes. I really think it's just hard for a guy like Jon Gruden to turn that off. Once you train your brain to think in really short, interesting sound bites, it's hard to not keep that going. Your brain constantly thinks of this interesting thing, this interesting thing, this other interesting thing. Your brain is always looking for headlines, little interesting stuff like that. And I think that's the only thing Jon Gruden's really struggling with. Not the only thing, a big thing Jon Gruden is struggling with as a head coach is he just says too much. He just gives away too much information because that's what he did for years. But to take that Jon Gruden quote, to take the quote about Kyler Murray and then jump to the conclusion that Jon Gruden is planning to trade Derek Carr and draft Kyler Murray, it's silly. It's really a big leap in logic to get from he's short so he'll make it to we're going to draft him and trade Derek Carr. It's very weird. So I'm doubling down. I've said it before. I'll say it again. The Raiders will not trade their quarterback, Derek Carr. And furthermore, the Raiders general manager, Mike Mayock, has repeatedly said Derek Carr is our franchise quarterback. I don't think they're going to get rid of the guy. I mean, you look at the Raiders roster, they have a lot of issues. They need a pass rusher. They might lose Jared Cook and need a new tight end. The point is the Raiders roster has a lot of flaws, weaknesses, and holes that need to be filled. And I really would be surprised if they traded the one roster spot they don't have a need at. They have a quarterback, a really solid quarterback who's played well in the past. Trading away Derek Carr would be, it seems counterproductive, and I really think you're going in the wrong direction if you get rid of a franchise quarterback like Derek Carr. I might be wrong. It's going to be fun to watch. If I'm wrong, that's the most interesting story in the world. If Derek Carr gets traded and they do draft Kyler Murray, that storylines there are gold, right? That would be really interesting. As a football fan, I would love that. But I don't think it's going to happen. I do not think the Raiders are going to trade away Derek Carr. I think people took a meaningless quote and really jumped in logic and made it a far bigger deal than it ever was. And I do not believe the Raiders are going to trade Derek Carr, and I really don't think they're going to draft Kyler Murray. I think people are taking a giant leap in logic to get there. My name is Zach Schomler. This is my podcast, Strong Opinion Sports. It is my favorite thing in the entire world. And I want to ask for your help. I want this show to grow. I want more people to watch and more people to listen to this podcast. My dream is to do this show as my full-time job. I want to own it myself. I want to do it on the internet and have complete control. I don't want to do it for CBS or ESPN. I don't want to work for a big network. I want to own it myself. And if you believe in that dream, please do me a huge favor. Help me grow by telling your friends about this podcast. Share it on Facebook, share a link on Twitter. Maybe you screenshot it, put it on Instagram. I don't have a marketing strategy beyond this. This is all I have. A lot of people, one of the most common comments I get on YouTube is, you have great content. We love your stuff. You deserve more viewers. What you should do is you should buy ad spaces on Facebook or Twitter or promote yourself and buy revenue, like buy ads. I have no money. I am a broke college kid. I can't buy ad spaces. I don't have money to pay for books. And so my plan, this is my marketing plan. This is my strategy. All I plan to do is put every ounce of effort I have into making the very best podcast I can. I believe if I make a great product that people believe in, that people like, then they will share it with their friends. And so if you agree with that, if you believe in the show, if you like what I do, please do me a huge favor. Tell your friends about it. Help me grow by telling your friends about this podcast.